All right, hi everybody. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about AI and the impact that it's having on the world, and then I'm going to spend most of this talk going through how to actually make it real. But I want to start with a comment that Andrew Ng has been saying recently, which is AI is the new electricity. Many of you in the room have probably heard this. Many of you in the room have probably even seen Andrew in a speech where he's talked about this. And this really resonates with me, and I love it. And I love it for two reasons. One is that electricity changed everything. It really, truly touched every industry on the planet. But the other reason is, for a long time, people had no idea what to do with it. It was this amorphous thing that people said mattered, but people didn't get it. And people struggled for a long time with, how do I actually turn electricity into something that can change any business that I'm involved with or any activity that I do? And as we saw over time, it really did touch every industry. You know, when you look at the lights in the room, obviously, but when you think about communication, wire transfers and subsequently telephones, when you look at healthcare, what would the healthcare industry be without electricity? Look at agriculture. Agriculture is a business most people don't think of when they think about electricity, but electricity fundamentally changed that business because it enabled refrigeration to be real. And when you could refrigerate product, the agriculture industry dramatically shifted. Finance, the backbone of that, and at the end of the day, the assembly line. So really, there isn't a business in the world that electricity didn't touch. And I think AI is going to be the same way. It's going to touch every single business on the planet in an incredibly meaningful way. It's going to do it faster, too. So when we think about how transformation happens and the cycles that we've been through over time, I'd like to go back to the World Economic Forum. And many of you are probably aware that in 2016, the topic of their conference was the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And within the construct of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, it was really about how AI and related activities and technologies are going to transform the way society works. And when you get a group of heads of state and CEOs of companies together and choose to talk about something, it's not going to be a tech wave. It's something that is real and meaningful about changes in the way business gets done and the way societies interact. And the fact that they chose to talk about this and have been subsequently really speaks volumes to me about the fact that we are entering that type of transformational wave. And as you can see from this chart, everyone we've been through, steam, electricity, the digital age that all of us have been living through for our lifetimes, have been getting shorter and shorter. And we're seeing that reduction in time continue as we look at artificial intelligence, where what used to take decades to transform the way business got done is now happening in years. So really quick time change. And you can see some of these quotes up here about, the one from Google really resonates with me, which is, you have the CEO of a company that undisputedly is one of the best in the world at monetizing mobility and digital. And they're saying that that was yesterday. Where we're headed today is to an AI-first world. And they're not just saying it, they're walking the walk. Companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and IBM are spending tens of billions of dollars on this, significantly more than the venture world right now. And this is one of the only areas where you have the corporate world dramatically outspending the venture world because they see the impact and they get what's coming. To put it real for some numbers, McKinsey threw out earlier this year that 49% of the tasks that people are paid to do today can be automated with artificial intelligence technology. Think about that. That's not 45% of the things that people work on or do as a hobby. 49% of what we pay people to do can already be automated today with technology that has been demonstrated to be viable, not something in research. That's pretty impressive. What's even more shocking is you look at Gartner saying that within 2 years, by 2020, 85% of a business's relationships are going to be maintained via virtual assistants. And kind of the amusing quote there is that by 2020, we'll have more conversations with bots than we do with our spouses. Unfortunately, I think my wife and Alexa might already have passed that threshold with me, but that's my cross to bear. But there's going to be some real winners coming out of that. PricewaterhouseCoopers recently came out with a study where they said that the global GDP is going to increase by $15.7 trillion by 2030. To put that in perspective, that's, roughly speaking, a percentage increase in GDP per year over the next 12 to 13 years coming as a result of AI. That's something we've never lived through. That's a fundamental game changer in how society is going to work and with the impact that AI is going to have. So there's massive opportunity for the companies that get this right. The flip of that is change is happening fast. Every 2 weeks, a company is being knocked out of the S&P 500. The average lifespan of an S&P 500 company is 15 years now, down from 75 years, and it's continuing to shrink. So even if this rate of change stays constant, that means that a decade from now, when we've generated that 15.7 trillion in global GDP increases, 3 out of every 4 companies that we think of as leaders are going to be brand new. So there's tremendous upside for the companies that make that turn and leverage AI and actually capitalize on what's out there, but there's a ton of risk for the companies that don't. So that begs a question very similar to electricity. How do I do it? What do I actually, how do I look at that? So I have one quick educational video clip that I'd like to play to kind of set the tone for that before I jump into the how we actually make that transition. So the obvious lesson we can take away from that, first of all, is don't bring a sword to a gunfight. The more relevant one for this conversation, though, is don't bring a 20th century business model to an AI-first world. Doing the same thing slightly better or slightly faster is not going to be competitive in tomorrow's landscape. So, given that, how do we actually transform? Most of the people in the room right now are involved with AI in some way or another. And as you look at large organizations in the enterprise, people struggle with, how do I actually make that pivot? How do I capitalize on this potential that's out there and do it in a way that's going to create real returns? So really 7 steps. Start with what's possible. Understand the breadth of what you do. And this is really just understanding what's possible with AI. The fact that you're here in the room today is a great start to that. Start to get grounded in what's possible and what's not, because there's a lot of things that you'll read and a lot of hype that you'll see that will cloud your judgment about what might or might not be real. Dig under the covers a little bit and figure out what's possible. And then look at the data. Data is really the fuel behind this. So understand what data you're going to need. From that, you can start to decompose that into what are the different services that I need to build so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time I want to build something new in my organization. Then you can start to look at technology platforms. Unfortunately, many times I see people look at technology first and then try to retrofit back into that. That really is a middle of the process step of looking at what technology is out there. From there, start to actually build solutions. And one of the great things about AI is you can do that quickly. You can create real results in a period of weeks or months rather than years. And design matters. This is one thing that I think many companies are learning, and some of the most successful ones have really nailed, which is making it compelling and easy for people to interact with technology is going to be a huge differentiator going forward. And last but not least, iterate. This is going to be a learning process. So let me walk through these steps in a bit more detail. When we first start trying to assess what's possible and how do I work with AI, I like to start with the framework that really breaks it down into 3 simple pillars. Conversational technology, insight generation, and business acceleration. So walking through each of these, on the conversational technology side, this is something that is going to change the way we interact with technology. We've been fascinated by the concept that we can talk to computers for the better part of 50 or 60 years, and it's finally real. We recently passed a threshold where 10% of US households have a conversational intelligent assistant in the house in the form of an Alexa or Google Home. That blew my mind, because that happened in 2.5 years. To put that in perspective, it took smartphones 5 years to get to a 10% adoption rate. So in-home assistants did that in half the time frame. If you think about the fact that smartphones have only been in existence for 10 years and extrapolate that out, that means in another 2.5 years, we're probably going to be thinking about in-home assistants the same way we think about smartphones. They're just an expectation that everybody has one and it's part of how we engage. That's a massive shift from where we're at today as you think about how you work with your customers from a retail point of view, from a consumer point of view. And that progression is happening quickly. We've had chatbots, which are, frankly, they're kind of dumb, but they get a job done. They're very good at basic tasks. The technology is there today to move to assistants. Assistants are taking that technology and asking clarifying questions back, acting the same way that a person would in a very basic way to understand more information about the questions you're trying to answer and how to drive that. Then moving forward to an expert, which is incorporating a layer of knowledge about a specific area on top of that. And all of this is possible, and your customers are going to expect this, and your employees are going to expect this over the next few years. I have Savant up there as something that is coming someday in the future, maybe, of that superhuman intellect, but I don't think it's anywhere in the near future, and I don't think you need to worry about it or think about it from a corporate point of view. So the next major wave is insight generation, looking at how I can take all the data that I have and turn that into insights that I can use to steer my business. Looking at, what are the things I don't know that I can pull information out of, or looking at how I can move the needle KPI-wise. There's some companies that I love out there that are doing great jobs. You've got Luminoso, which takes natural language and helps you extract the insights out of that. So if you want to figure out, why is customer churn going up, let me feed in a bunch of unstructured data and get answers out from that very quickly. If you want to look at image, there's companies like Netra and Clarify where you can take tons of imagery and figure out how your consumers are interacting with the real world. What are the brands are they acting with? What are they doing from an activity point of view to really understand how people are engaging with your company? This is all information that's out there for the taking today, and companies are starting to leverage that to actually identify very quickly, how do I move the needle? And it's working. In a recent study that McKinsey did, I think it was 5 to 7% average increases in profitability for companies that had adopted AI already. Think about that. 5 to 7% increases of profitability. That's a huge move of the needle, and we're just at the very, very beginning of the potential of what can be done. So the third tranche is around business acceleration, looking at how we can take some of those tasks that can be automated. And I say tasks, not jobs, very explicitly, because most jobs are going to change, and in many cases, we're actually going to create more jobs as a result of AI. But the work that we do is going to be different because many of the individual pieces can now be automated. So people can be more effective and more efficient at what they do and prioritize their effort on things that are uniquely human. So when people look at this, they always start at that bottom of the pyramid with cost reduction. Great, I can save cost. And that's nice. I'd like a profitable company as well as the next person. But to me, where the real upside is that competitive advantage and insight generation. How do I actually do things better and provide better business value to the people that are paying me money? And eventually, how do I even identify new businesses, new things that I can do today because cost efficiency is so much greater that I couldn't have done before? So this is an area where I think we're going to see industries look dramatically different over the next decade as people catch on to the potential and promise of what's here. Just to kind of drive home that point about man plus machine, which I think is a very important one. This is from a study that the White House Commission included last year when they did a study on AI. And AI had a 7.5% fail rate in identifying cancerous cells, and doctors had a much better 3% fail rate. But when you put the two of them together, that went down to a 0.5% fail rate. In very real human terms, that means out of every 200 people that were diagnosed with cancerous cells previously, 5 of them are having a much better outcome and a much better life because of AI and because of humans and machines working together in partnership. So when you put all that together, that kind of completes that first step of the process of figuring out what's possible and put all of that together, write all of that down so you have a roadmap of here's all the things I could do, here's all the ways my business might change. Doesn't mean that you need to do all of them, doesn't mean that you should do all of them, but knowing what's out there really helps ground you in what you want to prioritize and then lets you go to define what you need from a data point of view. The world that we all came from, this was kind of what we had. We had our first-party data. We had what we knew. The world's changing, though. There's tons of other data that's out there that we now can aggregate and collect that pull information together about why things are happening and why people are behaving the way they do as we look at all of that external data that's for sale. And that really gives us that insight into why people are behaving the way they are and why our customers are behaving the way they are. And all of this is a fuel for a lot of the AI platforms that we'll build in our enterprise. Then you can start to decompose this. Look at how does this break out into services? There's nobody out there that does everything perfect today. I wish there was. I haven't seen it. I don't think we're going to be there ever because I think that there's a place for a lot of best-of-breed providers that do very specific things. And as you start to map this out for your own company and for your own set of use cases and data that you've identified, you'll come up with a set of services that will make sense for your company specifically. And then you can even decompose this to what are the big buckets of technology platforms? How do I map this to different platforms that I can leverage, that I can purchase, or that I can build in-house? There's still a place for bespoke. I tend to be a buy versus build type of person in general. But when you decompose it this way, you can really make that intelligent choice at each step of the way for each type of major service that you need to build. Now you're finally ready to execute. And I'm going to steal a phrase from a gentleman that spoke in the London event, the AI Summit, Mark Lien from Lloyd's. And he talked about proof of value, which I love that phrase. So it's not about proof of concepts or pilot projects. It's about doing something short and simple to prove value and demonstrate a real return. And that's what you can do with AI solutions because they are so data-driven that you can set out some very clear objectives. What do you want to do? What impact do you want to have? And in a period of weeks or months, demonstrate whether that's real or not. And that allows you to continue to build and iterate where you're having success. And as you build more solutions, they build off each other and you get leverage of what you've already built from that service-based approach. Now talk briefly about design. When people build AI solutions, everybody thinks about people are going to do what I want. There's a happy path that they're going to follow, and people are rational the same way I am. That's just not true at all. The reality is people will confound you, they will frustrate you, they will upset you, and they will do everything that you thought was never possible. Sometimes you'll think they're doing it just to, frankly annoy you, but the reality is people are going to act in ways that you don't expect, and you need to design around that and build for that. And that is what is making many success or failures happen today, is that focus on the experiential design. And last but not least, iterate. This is going to be a learning process for all of us, and this industry is moving so fast and evolving so rapidly that things are going to change, both internally in your organization as you look at different data needs, as people do things that shock you. The industry is going to evolve. I think the people that we think of as market leaders now, a decade from now, some of them probably still will be. There'll probably be new companies that we've never heard of that are doing amazing things. And don't be disheartened. Learn from failure. You're going to stumble at times. Take that as a learning opportunity and figure out, how can I improve? How can I do things that take that learning and apply it and make things better? And finally, look at new opportunities. As you go down this road, it's going to become more and more clear to you what's possible. And I'll end with the final note of AI in the enterprise is really about expanding what's humanly possible and making everybody much more effective and efficient at what they do, from employees to customers to really everybody that's involved throughout the entire process of your business. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.